Welcome back. I'm your host, Susanna May O'Hagan, and today we'll be talking about Jack the Ripper Part 2. I don't know if we'll have multiple parts or not. This is a long case. Jack the Ripper's research, who claims to have identified the serial killer with a 100% DNA match, seeks closure. I mean, that is a huge thing. One of the biggest serial killer mysteries of all time, the identity of Jack the Ripper. He has finally been solved, according to a British researcher who is now seeking legal confirmation on behalf of a victim's family. Over a century after he murdered and manipulated London's women in 1888, the long mythological killer's identity has allegedly been confirmed by DNA found on a shawl, historian Russell Edwards said. Now, this is from People. I'm reading a lot of articles that I found online. Edward claims that Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber who was 23 at the time of the murders, is the Ripper based on what he said is a 100% DNA match found on the entire piece. He told Today's Australia in a February 1st interview. Aaron was a suspect in the original investigation but was never arrested. The shawl that ultimately incriminated Aaron, per the research, was taken from the scene of Katerina's 1888 murder in London, Mitty Square. Later came into Edward's possession in 2007. Edward was the fourth of 5 women's death who linked to a single killer, believed to be the Ripper. Speaking about the alleged killer with Today Australia, Edward said Aaron had schizophrenia and was admitted into an asylum. The historian also noted that in 19th century London, his occupation as a barber, or barber surgeon as it was called at the time, further points to him fitting the Ripper's bill. In those days, you had ANATOMICAL, knowledge, as a barber, which when you know the case, you know that the murders must have had that type of knowledge to commit the crimes that he did, Edward told the outlet, citing an alleged 1891 document that named Aaron a strong suspect. The researcher also said that the barber had strong homicidal tendencies and was prone to solitary vics and auditory hallucinations. Edward, who is the author of a book naming Jack the Ripper, has long believed Aaron to be the infamous London serial killer, a claim he first made over a decade ago. The historian allegedly confirmed that Aaron's DNA was on EDDOWES Shaw with the help of Dr. J.A.R.I. Lindner, a senior lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University, who isolated small segments of DNA from bread strands on the garment, per CBS News. The segments were the match with a direct descendant of EDDOWES, while DNA from stem stains on the shawl was matched with a descendant of K. Some people doubt Edward's finding, as the DNA evidence attached to his claim has been published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, yet along with 10 decades of Edwards, who all want closure, are seeking legal acknowledgement that Kay is the man responsible for her and the other victims' murders, a lengthy process that has already begun. Part of this closure, the historian still comes from seeing Kay named linked to the murder, not Jack the Ripper. Really, we want is to stop the name being branded around, he told Today Australia, because the name actually was created by an enterprising journalist and actually doesn't have anything to do with the murder whatsoever. But this is the name given to this murder. The historian also hopes to see no more people coming up with false, I want to say, suspects, he told the outlets, basically went to close the story. So here are some comments. They found a single sample of semen on a shawl that identified the owner of that particular shawl, but that doesn't mean he's the killer. It just means if they find the same exact DNA on the belongings of the other victims that were found at the crime scene, then you can start looking at him. Until then, it means we know who one of her people were. Do you know anything about the original case? He was originally a suspect in her murder. It also said he was later put in asylum for schizophrenia, to many fingers pointing to this guy. I saw a show on cable of a guy who bought the shawl. It showed the blood and it could be sampled. He had an instinct that it might be him. Jack the Ripper's identity revealed after DNA breakthrough, history says. There are so many. And this is why I don't know how many years it's been, because this one says 137, another one said 130. There are so many different, things. One of the history's oldest mysteries, the true identity of the infamous killer Jack the Ripper who terrorized Victorian London, East End in the late 1800s, may have finally been solved after 137 years. As the murderer who brutally, I can't say those words on here, 5 women, most of them workers, who reportedly been identified. English historian and author Russell Edwards claimed the DNA evidence from a shawl recovered at a crime scene identified Jack the Ripper as Aaron, a 23-year-old Polish immigrant who died in a mental institution in 1990, according to the New York Post. When we matched the DNA from the blood on the shawl with a direct female descendant of the victim, it was the singular most amazing moment of my life at that time, Edward told Today in Australia. We tested left on the shawl and we matched that. I was dumbfounded that we actually had discovered who Jack the Ripper truly was. We don't have to go through all of this again, but let's see what else we have. I'm curious if there's much more. People are saying Aaron K was found to be 100% matched to Jack the Ripper. Why is this happening? Okay. So, a lot of people believe it's this Aaron guy. I feel like we do need a little more. I want to see if there's any more evidence on other people, because I'm very curious if there is. So there are some things like, who has been identified as Jack the Ripper? With the help of a botanist at Liverpool, the DNA sample of a shawl recovered from the scene of the victim, Edwards result identified Aaron. What the critics are saying, despite the available evidence, critics have argued that there was no way to prove that the shawl was ever at the crime scene. Also, the fact that the genetic sequence of the living relative of Katerina and Aaron were not published in a paper due to UK law, the published findings aren't showing the whole picture. Weather Person, a forensic scientist at the Institute of Legal Medicine at Inbrooks Media University in Australia, believes the DNA sequence poses no risk to and should be shared. Otherwise, the reader cannot judge the results. I wonder where science and research are going when we start to avoid showing results but instead present colored boxes. Why Jack the Ripper was never caught, as identified, is revealed 137 years later through 100% DNA match. Wait, why? The reason the failure to capture Jack the Ripper when he was terrorizing the streets of Whitechapel in the 19th century has been revealed. It looks like the identity of the infamous serial killer has been revealed after a 100% DNA match. That is, if we are able to believe Reaperology Russell Edwards. The historian has been studying the case and the heinous crimes around it for years, as well as what the serial killer may have looked like. Over 130 years since the Ripper carried out his killings in London, Whitechapel district in 1888. It is believed that he murdered at least 5 women by the names of Mary. We already know this, I thought we would get a little new. Edward claims that the extract DNA from a recovered shawl found on Katerina cat at the scene proves the true identity of the serial killer, who he says is Aaron, a Polish barber. A relative was so happy to be tested, which helped to crack the case, claims the expert. He recently told The Sun that he felt elevated when he saw the 100% match. This brings closure, and it's a form of justice from the descendants. The author has previously spoke to Lab Bible about the killer, and particularly he got away with multiple murders. Believing that the shell belonged to Jack himself, Edward explains that a huge amount of science went in to prove that it didn't belong to the victim. We thought it was her shawl, but through the scientific analysis, we realized that she couldn't have afforded to own it, and realized the only person that could have left the shawl at the murder scene was him, he recalled. But after other experts analyzed the shawl, he was sure of it, and while some others claimed that the evidence pointed towards a man named Walter, Edward was centering that it was Aaron. The K family was eventually contacted and told him that they knew it was him, and that was Jack the Ripper. Going into why he possibly wasn't caught, Edward explained that the absence of a DNA testing and other modern technologies played a huge part in authorities struggling to catch the killer. He also claimed that police knew who he was, explaining Robert Anderson wrote his memoir, The Lighter Side of My Official Life, and in there they admitted they knew the identity of Jack the Ripper. And you couldn't have told someone? They also said they knew the identity of the guy who wrote the name Jack the Ripper in the Dear Boss letter, but they didn't want to tell tales out of school. Andrew was the assistant commissioner of the Metropolitan Police while the Ripper murders were being investigated. Edward claimed that the killer was protected as the suspect's brother was a Mason, and that some of the murders were linked to the 3 blood oath of the group. He said one is have their throat, the other is their, and the other is to be okay. Edward explains last year that he was eager to take his findings to the UK High Court, his 3rd attempt to do so in the last few years, adding, "It's been brought and prepared for a case to go to High Court. That's exactly what we're going to do." The case, which has been not just a little piece of paper or just a comment from a scientist, the entire case, and the Brazier, a high court brazier that basically worked in the Royal Court of Justice, so the highest court in the land, is the level this man's at. He went on, he also got a PhD in biochemistry, and both of him, of the coroner, has seen evidence that convinces enough that it was Aaron. A high court Brewster with a PhD in biochemistry on the back of the coroner's comment actually states that if the newly presented DNA evidence was available to the coroner back in 1888, it would have been justified for the coroner to arrest Aaron and try him for murder, and Katerina Woes and the others for so-called Ripper murders. At the time, the High Court said they didn't comment on the initial case. Man who discovered DNA 100 years, Shaw, confirming Jack the Ripper's identity, speaks out on his findings. Who has been identified as Jack the Ripper? Has scientists, analysts solved the mystery? Man who claims to have identified Jack the Ripper explains why he was never caught. When it comes to serial killers, the most famous of them all has to go back to Jack the Ripper, the infamous terror of Whitechapel, who shocked Victorian era London with a series of gruesome murders and famously was never caught. Jack has never been officially identified, but that doesn't mean there isn't a range of suspects championed by various true crime people. People keep thinking they're uncovered new evidence that points the finger to new suspects, and Jack the Ripper has been suggested as being pretty much everything from a violent Londoner to a famous French painter to perhaps most famously the grandson of Queen Victoria. That one I was like, I could see why no one would want to tell on Queen Victoria's son. Like, would you? No. Various authors have published books proclaiming the Ripper suspects to be the genuine article, and among them is Russell, who recently claimed he not only proven Jack the Ripper's identity, but created an image of what he might have looked like. Edward, who wrote the book naming Jack the Ripper the definition revealed, claims that the infamous serial killer's real name was Aaron Kashaman. I think that is all we really need. Wait, okay, here's some more. I'm trying to see if I can find anything else we don't know about this case. Why Jack the Ripper was never caught, as DNA breakthrough could finally unmask the 136-year-old mystery. How old is this case? I have so many different people saying it's different. I'm so confused. I got 137, 136, 130. How old is this case? Someone let me know in the comments below if you really know the how long. I mean, there's so many, like, who knows? I guess this is what they think he might look like. Uncover the cover of Darkness, victim's circumstances, attorney, poor policing methods, meddling media, murder is rare. Okay, I think I gave you all information I can without it repeating myself constantly. There are a lot of different articles on this. Do you think we actually found Jack the Ripper? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think we really found him, or do you think that it's not really what was going on? Or do you think we need more evidence to prove? I kind of like this guy because he has been evidence, and I hate to say people back then with disabilities of any kind, with mental, physical, they didn't give us enough help. For someone who has physical and mental disabilities, they didn't give us enough help to survive in the real world, and they're still slowly trying to, but like, who knows if back then they even figured that one out. Like, I don't know. He also was accused already once. I don't know if twice is a good thing. Like, I mean, it's suspicious when you're accused. I did find Victoria's son kind of like, interesting. You almost kind of like, I could see why they wouldn't tell on him if it was the grandson. But also, who knows? There wasn't DNA evidence back then. I don't really know how crimes worked back then, but if we could find out this guy's DNA, maybe we can help some of the other cases, like JonBenet Ramsey, Amber from the Amber Alert. We could find Adams. Like, it'd be nice that if this old case finally got solved, can we find and help the other cases that need to be solved that I know of? Like, one of my favorites, which is probably the most disturbing from where I live, has to be the Black Dahlia. That one was severely disturbing. And if we could find them, like get DNA and stuff, maybe it would, like, if we saw this case, maybe it would help more. Like, I know so many cases. Okay, well, I hope y'all have a great and wonderful day. Let me know, do you think this case is solved? Do you think we found the guy? We didn't find the guy? Do we need more evidence? I'm leaning towards we might need a little more evidence, but I'm hoping that they're on the right track. Like, just maybe a little more evidence would be good so we can officially say, yes, that's him, and thank gosh. Like, that would be so